Don't make a scene, Maya. Sit in the back with the rest of the rental car people. My mother snatched the boarding pass from the kiosk tray and let it fall onto the terminal floor, where it skidded against the toe of my boot. She was holding 3 other passes fanned out in her hand like a winning poker hand. First class, all of them, freshly printed for my sister and her husband and their twin boys. Pearson was packed that morning, every gate humming with the particular chaos of a long weekend in July, and at least 40 people turned to look at us. She didn't lower her voice. She never did when she wanted an audience. Some of us built something with our lives. Some of us just process other people's paperwork for a living. She straightened the cuff of her blazer, the one I'd quietly paid for 2 Christmases ago, through a numbered account she still doesn't know exists. You wouldn't even know what to do with a lounge pass, Maya. You'd probably just sit there counting the free pretzels. My brother-in-law laughed into his coffee. My sister looked at her phone. Nobody at that gate said a word in my defense, and for 19 years, that had been the deal. I paid, and they pretended I didn't exist except when they needed to remind everyone I was beneath them. I didn't bend down for the pass. I reached into my jacket instead and pulled out a black card with a red maple leaf stripe across the corner, the kind of card that doesn't come from a bank. I walked past my mother without a glance, straight to the RCMP liaison post by security, and held it out to the officer on duty. His eyes flicked from the card to my face and back again, and then he pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. Behind me, the floor started to hum. 6 tactical officers came through the security checkpoint in a wedge formation, black gear, no wasted movement, and locked into a ring around me so fast that the families nearby actually screamed and pressed themselves against the walls. A staff sergeant stepped through the wall of bodies, snapped his boots together, and gave a salute sharp enough to cut glass. Superintendent Whitfield, your transport's confirmed for the tarmac. We move on your word. I will remember the color that drained out of my mother's face for the rest of my life. It went from champagne to something closer to ash, and for the first time in my entire adult life, she had absolutely nothing to say. If you've ever paid for a family that only knew how to spend you, hit that follow button right now. Because to understand why I let this happen in front of 200 strangers at Pearson, you have to go back to a Thanksgiving dinner in Mississauga 11 months earlier, the night I finally stopped being anyone's secret. I'd pulled into my mother's driveway at 4:45, still in my work boots, still smelling faintly of the cordite and diesel that clung to everything after a long stretch on a federal task force. I'd been up for 26 hours straight running surveillance on a cross-border smuggling ring that had been moving fentanyl precursor through 3 provinces, and I had exactly enough energy left to want a plate of turkey and maybe 10 minutes where nobody asked anything of me. My mother opened the door before I'd even reached the porch, her face arranged into the particular disappointment she reserved only for me. That truck of yours is an eyesore, Maya. Park it down the street. Your sister's in-laws are coming, and I will not have them thinking we associate with people who drive like that. She didn't ask about the case, the 10-hour stakeout in an unmarked van outside a chop shop in Brampton, the bruise blooming under my collarbone from a vest strap that had taken more impact than it was rated for. She'd never asked. As far as my mother was concerned, I had a little government job, something vague involving forms and a cubicle, the kind of career a daughter settles for when she lacks the ambition her sister apparently had in abundance. Inside, the dining table was set for 14, the good china out, the leaf added to make room for my sister's in-laws and their endless extended family. I was seated at the far corner, past the kids' table almost, with a plate that didn't match, chipped on one edge, the kind you keep for the dog. My youngest nephew, 6 years old and already fluent in the family's particular cruelty, leaned over and asked his mother in a stage whisper why Auntie Maya always got the broken one. Nobody answered him. Nobody ever did. My mother carved the turkey and built a plate for my brother-in-law first, the breast meat, the good stuffing, a generous pour of gravy, and announced to the table, loud enough for the in-laws to hear, this man built an entire logistics company from nothing, from absolutely nothing, from nothing. That company had been 4 weeks from a CRA seizure order 18 months earlier, payroll bouncing, his one major client threatening to walk, and the only reason there was still a company to brag about was $110,000 I'd wired through a numbered trust before any of them woke up that morning. He'd told his investors it was an angel round from a silent partner who believed in his vision. The silent partner was sitting at the kids' table eating dry turkey off a chipped plate. When I reached for the gravy boat, my mother slid it down to my sister's mother-in-law instead. White meat's better for you anyway, she said, not even looking at me. Sitting at a desk all day, you don't want the extra fat. No man's interested in a woman who's let herself go and works some clerk's job besides. One of the in-laws, an older man with a Tim Hortons travel mug he'd brought into the house out of habit, leaned across and asked what I did for work. Before I could open my mouth, my mother answered for me. Oh, she does paperwork for the federal government, nothing exciting. We don't really talk about it. He nodded politely and spent the rest of dinner with his back half turned toward me, the way people do when they've decided you're not worth the conversation. After the meal, my brother-in-law tossed my mother a set of keys with the kind of theatrical flourish he reserved for moments he wanted witnessed. A new Lexus, leased in her name, paid for, I happen to know, by a line of credit he was 3 months behind on. She wept and clutched him like he'd cured something terminal. Then she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and slid an envelope across the table to me, landing it against my water glass. I found these cleaning out a drawer. Some of the coupons are expired, but if you make a fuss at the till, sometimes the cashier just lets it go out of pity. Canned tuna, 2 for 1, 3 months past the date. My sister laughed out loud, actually laughed, and my niece, the one who'd asked about the plate, tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Is Auntie Maya poor?" Nobody corrected her. 14 people at that table, and not one of them said a single word. Under the table, my hands were perfectly still, which is its own kind of skill. You learn it doing surveillance. Learn to keep your body language flat while everything underneath is roaring. I had my phone in my lap, the banking app open, the auto-pay screen glowing up at me. An $11,200 transfer scheduled for the first of the month, quietly covering the mortgage on the house I was being humiliated in, the house with the good china and the leaf in the table, and the new Lexus parked out front. 19 years of money earned doing work my own mother thought was beneath mentioning at her dinner table, routed straight back into keeping her comfortable enough to keep looking down on me. My thumb hovered over cancel. I didn't press it. Not because I couldn't, because some part of me, the part that had been trained since childhood to wait for permission, still wanted to do this the way I'd always done everything. Quietly, on my own schedule, without the scene my mother accused me of wanting to make. She clinked her glass before I'd even pushed my chair in. The trip to Banff was happening over the May-long weekend, first-class flights and a lodge suite for my sister's family, a boutique room in town for herself. And for me, she'd already forwarded the itinerary, $110 a night hostel, a 40-minute shuttle from the mountain. "And Maya," she added, pointing her glass at me like a conductor's baton, "you're handling the luggage at the airport, all 6 bags. Your brother-in-law's back can't take the strain, you understand." He nodded gravely, as if having someone else lift his suitcases was a documented medical condition. I excused myself without finishing my plate, walked past my truck still parked at the curb where I'd left it in defiance, and drove back to the city in silence. The highway was empty enough that the only sound was the engine and the particular kind of quiet that comes after you've decided something but haven't said it out loud yet. At 11 that night, I badged into the secure floor at headquarters, the access panel chiming my clearance level before the door released. I peeled off the worn fleece I wore as civilian cover, bought for $9 at a value village in Etobicoke, chosen specifically because it looked tired enough to sell the story that I was exactly what my family believed me to be. Underneath it, the credentials on the lanyard belonged to the superintendent who'd run point on a joint task force that had, the week before, dismantled a cell moving illegal firearms across 3 provincial lines. In the staff washroom, I rolled my sleeve up and looked at the scar along my forearm, the one from a raid that had gone sideways in a warehouse outside Hamilton 4 years back, where a round had grazed me close enough that the surgeon afterward told me, flatly, that 2 more centimeters would have been the end of the conversation. I'd been back at my desk in 11 days. Below it, a smaller mark, a burn from a flashbang that had detonated wrong during a training exercise in my 2nd year, the kind of scar nobody at my mother's table had ever asked about, because nobody at my mother's table knew it existed. I knelt at the floor safe and entered the code. Inside, my dress uniform hung pressed and ready, the superintendent's pips catching the overhead light. Beside it, a shoebox of letters I'd written home over the years, the kind you write at 3 in the morning on deployment, to a joint task force posting out east, when you're not sure you'll be writing the next one. I'd sealed cash inside more than one of them over the years, birthday money, Christmas money, money I didn't need and thought might matter more to her than another lecture about my career choices. I'd found one of those letters 4 years later in a recycling bin behind her garage, the seal still intact, the bills long gone. Someone had simply sliced it open from the side, taken the cash, and thrown the rest away unread. I pulled up the financial records on my secure laptop, the ones I kept for myself separate from anything my family could ever access. Over 19 years, the trust I'd quietly funded had paid out just over $1.4 million Canadian. Mortgage payments, the Lexus lease, my niece's private school tuition, 2 bailouts for my brother-in-law's company, my mother's line of credit, cleared twice when it had gotten dangerously close to collateral seizure. I had built their entire comfortable life from a federal salary and overtime pay they thought was barely enough to cover rent on a basement apartment, while they told dinner guests I shuffled paperwork and couldn't be bothered to dress nicely. I poured 2 fingers of rye, neat, and didn't sleep that night. 3 weeks later, at 6 in the morning, the floor erupted. Intelligence had flagged a coordinated attempt to move a significant firearms shipment through the Pearson cargo terminal timed to a holiday weekend, when staffing was thin and oversight was distracted. The same weekend, as it happened, that my family was flying out to Banff. An analyst put a tablet in front of me with the routing data, and I gave the order to lock down 3 cargo bays and pull in every available unit. My personal phone buzzed against my hip in the middle of it. A text from my mother. Don't forget to bring your own sunscreen for the trip. Don't even think about using your sister's. It's the expensive kind and your skin's so much oilier than hers. I was coordinating a federal interdiction to stop illegal firearms from reaching the street, and she was rationing me access to SPF. The phone rang 2 minutes later. She didn't say hello. She launched straight into the itinerary. Had I requested the time off? Was I clear that I'd be carrying all 6 bags by hand at the gate because checked luggage carts made the family look cheap? Was I aware I wasn't to order anything at restaurants because it's embarrassing when you just sit there with water? And was I prepared to watch the kids every evening so the adults could actually enjoy themselves? When I told her, flatly, that something had come up at work and I might be delayed, she laughed. It's a desk job, Maya. Nobody gets fired from filing forms. I swear you are the laziest person I have ever raised. My supervisor on that file was a deputy chief who had run major crimes units through 2 of the worst years organized violence had ever had in this country. A man who didn't blink when buildings were being evacuated around him. I said nothing to my mother. I hung up and walked back into the operations room, and I signed the authorization to deploy personally to the cargo terminal that weekend. The same weekend she expected me carrying her in-laws' suitcases through security. 2 days later, I stood at attention in the deputy chief's office while he flipped through my op file and stopped on a printout that shouldn't have been there. A forwarded email from my mother, an economy fare confirmation, a junior analyst had mistakenly bundled with the operational brief, middle seat back row, next to the lavatory. He looked at the printout, then at the insignia on my shoulder, and his expression went somewhere I'd only seen him go right before he sent people into something dangerous. Superintendent, what in God's name is this? I told him everything. The 19 years, the wire transfers, the chipped plate, the coupons, the niece asking if I was poor, the letters torn open for the cash and thrown away unread, the hostel 40 minutes from the lodge while everyone else stayed on the mountain. He listened without interrupting, without moving, and when I finished he was quiet long enough that I could hear the building's ventilation system cycling. Then he said, "You've talked armed men down off rooftops. You negotiated with a man holding his own daughter hostage in Scarborough and walked her out alive. And you're telling me you can't tell your own mother to stop treating you like the help." He told me family wasn't blood, it was conduct, and that I'd spent 2 decades proving my worth to people who'd already decided I had none. Then he picked up his desk phone and called the operations center directly, arranged secure ground transport and an RCMP liaison escort for me at Pearson for that weekend's deployment, and slid a credential across the desk, the black card, the maple leaf stripe, the kind that opens doors most people don't know exist. "You are not flying economy to a federal operation," he said. "Stand up straight, Superintendent. That's not a suggestion." The morning of the flight, an SUV pulled up outside my building, and before it had even stopped, my mother was leaning across her seat, complaining that if I scratched the leather handle of her garment bag loading it into the back, my salary wouldn't cover the replacement. My shoulder, the one with the old scar tissue, ached the whole way, hauling 6 bags into the cargo space alone while my brother-in-law adjusted the radio and my sister checked her lipstick in the visor mirror. Inside the vehicle, I was directed to the jump seat in the back with the overflow luggage wedged between a garment bag and a hard-shell suitcase that dug into my ribs every time we hit a pothole on the 401. The kids tossed candy wrappers over the seat back. One landed in my hair. My sister glanced back, saw it, and took a photo of me there. Instead of helping, the shutter sound audible even over the radio. At a coffee stop, my mother handed out drinks she'd ordered ahead. A caramel macchiato, an oat milk latte, hot chocolates for the kids, each one announced by name like a small ceremony. When she got to the bottom of the tray, she looked at me in the rearview mirror and said, almost cheerfully, "Oh, I forgot you. Well, you couldn't afford it anyway. There's water in the door somewhere." My brother-in-law laughed through his nose. My niece turned around with her tablet and held it up, a cartoon character stuck in a suitcase. "Look, it's you, Auntie Maya." Everyone in the front laughed except me. By the time we reached the terminal, my mother's voice had dropped into something low and venomous. "When we get inside, you walk 10 steps behind us. Your brother-in-law has business contacts on this flight, and I will not have anyone thinking we associate with the help. Do you understand me?" I understood her perfectly. I'd understood her for 19 years. What she didn't understand was who she'd just given that order to. At the kiosk, she dropped every last pretense in front of 200 strangers, threw the boarding pass at my feet, told me I was 41 years old with nothing to show for myself, told me to sit where I belonged, by the lavatory. A businessman nearby actually stopped walking to stare. A mother covered her son's ears. My brother-in-law had his phone out, filming, smirking, the way people do when they think there's no cost to cruelty performed in public. There was a cost, he just hadn't met it yet. I didn't pick up the pass. I walked to the liaison post instead, and the floor began to hum, and 6 officers in tactical gear came through that checkpoint like a wave breaking, and locked a perfect ring around me, while my mother and brother-in-law cowered behind their own luggage, using designer suitcases as shields against something they couldn't even name yet. Superintendent Whitfield, Tier 1 Tactical. The staff sergeant's voice carried across the entire concourse. Transports confirmed. My mother grabbed my brother-in-law's sleeve, hissing that I'd stolen someone's credentials, that the police were going to arrest the whole family, that this couldn't possibly be real, because in her mind I had never once existed as anything other than the daughter who shuffled paperwork and ate off the chipped plate. The crowd had their phones up, by then, dozens of them, every angle covered. I looked at her through the gap in the formation, and for the first time in my life, I let the silence stretch as long as it needed to. 11 months ago you threw a pass at my feet and told me to walk 10 steps behind you so your in-laws wouldn't see me as family. You gave me expired coupons at Thanksgiving while I ate off a plate that didn't match anyone else's. You told your granddaughter I was poor and let her believe it. You forgot to order me a coffee and called it a joke. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You didn't teach me to survive. The job taught me that. You didn't teach me what I'm worth. The people standing around me right now did. I glanced down at the pass, still lying on the floor between us. Keep the seat by the lavatory. It suits how you've always treated the people who actually held this family up. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. But every phone in that terminal kept recording. By the time I landed back in Toronto from the deployment, the clip had already crossed 2 million views, and a verified local news account had picked it up with the caption, "Mother humiliates RCMP superintendent at Pearson, then watch what happens." Veterans groups were tagging my brother-in-law's company. 2 of his clients pulled contracts within 48 hours, citing optics. My mother's curling club quietly removed her from the spring tournament roster after someone posted the clip in the club's group chat with the caption, "This is the woman who runs our silent auction committee." My phone lit up that night with messages from her, one after another. "Please, his business is falling apart. Just one photo of us in your uniform. I'll pay you whatever you want. Name a number." As if my whole life had only ever been a line item she hadn't finished negotiating. I didn't write her a paragraph explaining what she'd cost me. I opened my banking app, found the autopay still scheduled for the mortgage, and canceled it with 4 taps. Then I blocked her, then my sister, who'd texted that I was destroying the children. Then my brother-in-law, who wanted to fix this. Then an aunt, an uncle, and a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 6 years who suddenly remembered we were family. 3 weeks later, I flew out to Banff myself, off-duty, in the dress uniform I'd earned, and never once been allowed to wear in front of the people who should have been proud of it. I found them at the lodge lobby, the same lodge they'd once told me I couldn't afford to even sit in. My mother's blouse was stained with travel and stress, her hair flat, the Lexus payments already 3 weeks behind because the line of credit she'd leaned on for 2 decades simply wasn't there anymore. When she saw the insignia on my shoulder, she crossed the lobby on her knees, grabbing at the hem of my coat, begging me to fix what I'd already calmly, deliberately let break. "You're not crying because you were cruel to me," I told her, and I meant every word of it. "You're crying because the money stopped." I stepped back, out of her reach, for good. DNA doesn't make a family. Conduct does. You broke this one yourself, one Thanksgiving plate at a time. You can be the one who cleans it up. I turned and walked through that lobby, past people who didn't move to stop me, past a front desk clerk who looked at me like he finally understood exactly which one of us had been carrying the other for 19 years, and out into the cold mountain air, where for the first time since I was a kid, nobody on earth was waiting for me to pay for something.